I got my slide deck, so I'll go for a little introduction, then we'll do a live thing. This is going to be using Dynamo to create a rapid prototype model to automate your work. A little bit about me. I have over 10 years experience in AEC industry with a focus on design technology and BIM expertise, including architectural design, construction planning, field operations, research, developing, name it. So I've been doing a little bit of everything over the last several years. And I always focus on how we can get more done with tools at hand. A great example of that is, Dynamo. So the goal for today is to identify some repetitive tasks and use Dynamo to manage that for you and create a repeatable workflow. So we don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to keep it very simple today. But the idea is I'm going to talk through something I did that can perhaps inspire all of you to try some scripting if you haven't done so already in a simple way that won't blow your mind, but might be useful. So we'll talk about some setup here. So if you guys want to follow along separately, you can. The essentials will be, let's skip this, Revit. I'm using 2022. I think the last from 2020 to 24 should be fine. Make sure you have Dynamo recent version installed, 2.10x, meaning 2.10 and above. Get some necessary packages if you need them, and get Excel if you don't have them installed, because I'm using Excel spreadsheet. Then if you don't know anything about Dynamo and you really want to learn more, make sure you try out the Dynamo Primer. That's free. And the Dynamo User Forum is a great resource for questions. Don't worry, this deck I will share with all of you at the end of this presentation. So if you're hurriedly taking notes, you can take it easy. Okay, I'm going to skip a few of these just so we get to the point. And we'll talk about the scripting, and I'll do the demo right now. And the premise of all this was I was trying to make like multi-tower designs, just kind of quickly iterate them for an early phase of a project. And you could do it the old-fashioned way, where we'll just copy paste and modify, but it was a bit tedious. So I wanted to see if Dynamo could help me out with this. So there's a lot of like repetitive tasks you can automate, and that's usually a cornerstone and a good starting point for any automation. There's something you could just over and over and over repeat again manually that you could just say, if I just had some instructions, I could make this automatic, right? Revit already has some built-in stuff for that, like generating certain content like views. But there's ways you can make the modeling go quickly using the Dynamo node. So a tower is a great example, a lot of repetitive elements, a lot of work to be done if you have to do it manually. So let's walk through a simple tower example. And I'll start with this concept of input, process, output. And this is how I structure my scripts for Dynamo. And if you're not familiar with it, Dynamo, to get anything out of it, you have to put it into it. It doesn't just work in a vacuum. You have to tell it, put these things into some kind of process. So the inputs could just be text. It could be things called in from Revit model. And then from there, you tell it to do some instructions to modify the inputs, and then spits out an output. So that's how I code these scripts. It's always good to organize them. So input, process, output. And I'll show you that as we go. And we'll start with the first one, which will be even simpler. It'll be the input of getting levels. So we're going to create levels and then create an output based on those levels of Dynamo. So with no further ado, let's go to our handy dandy Dynamo script. And just a disclaimer, make sure whatever file you're using, you understand where the levels lie, because the script will generate assuming from a certain base point. In this case, I have a 0, level 1 and 2. Revit always has some basic levels, so make sure you know where your levels are starting. Otherwise, you'll have a weird time with this. So I have this basic Revit model to be used. I know exactly where model is positioned in space, and I just want to add a bunch of levels, right? We can't get anything done in Revit without levels. If you're adding stuff to Revit without levels, don't do that. That's dangerous and cause you accidents. Always make sure you host things by level, and we'll see examples of how that works in this little presentation. So make sure you go to Manage tabs, click on Dynamo, and let it load for a moment. This one's getting started. And since this is a live demonstration, anything could go wrong, which is fun and exciting, but also lends itself to working on the spot, any issues. So let's see how this goes. I'll bring this over here. And since this window wants to be dominant at all times, I'll have to go between this and Revit. Okay, so I have my Dynamo environment. I'm going to open. I have some files ready to go here. These are my Dynamo files, keep them in one area. I'll start with level by code. This is really simple. All this is the input like I mentioned here, and an output. You don't have to really do any processing. It actually kind of works itself out with the level by elevation. Level by elevation will just create as many levels as you want according to elevation information. And of course, you have to remember if it's your feet or meters. In this case, it's feet. And remember I said, I already have level 1 and 2. Level 1 or level 1, 0, level 2 is 10. I want to continue that pacing and just add more levels until I get to 812 feet. So it's going to be starting at level 3 at 20 feet, going all the way to level, level 3 at 20 feet, going all the way up to 812 feet in 12 feet increments. That's all this means. Start 10 steps. Plug that into the level by elevation. And if you want to change these numbers, you could change this to whatever, 500 or anything you like. That's just the value. But we're just going to use this input and run it and see what happens. This run started, completed, and I got my levels. All right. So that's something you don't have to do manually. If you ever have to do a lot of levels, even a few, do it through Dynamo. It's precise, it follows instructions, you get everything you want. Cool. We did our levels. Now we can add the actual building. And this is where it gets a little more interesting. And I'll start from the end in mind. The end in mind, in this case, is to generate an automatic building. The output is where we'll focus on, which is to create a wall and create floors. So I want both walls and floors. And this is just saying this wall we've created, or this wall will be created by curve, meaning lines, and the height. Curve, height, level, wall type. We won't go into too much detail here, but that's what I'm using to generate the actual walls. And the floors, similar concept, they'll be outlines, lines, and level. So even though the language here is a little different, the concept's the same. Horizontal levels or horizontal lines, vertical levels. And the inputs on the left here will be pretty straightforward. All we're doing is telling it what kind of wall type. Basic curtain wall, again, in all our projects, curtain wall 1 for the walls. Make sure all elements are category, levels. If it's not levels, it's not going to work. And then floor types, you can pick whatever floor type. I just put generic 12. As long as the floor, this will work. And then we can pick our XYZ points. This is a four-sided or four-cornered building. So I can either assign each one of these XYZ values separately or use these sliders. So I'll show you how that works in a moment. But all we're doing is we're taking these points, kind of like connect the dots, and these types, these element types, and lining them up through the processing. That's the input, that's the output. We're just going to tell them, combine all the XYZ points into a list, combine the lists, and then you'll create the floor outline, and then add levels to that and basically mix and match. I would like to go into more detail, but we don't have a ton of time, so I'll go ahead and ask any questions you want. But this is my process of basically telling it use the geometry to process the location of everything. So that's all it is. This middle portion is just processing geometry and inputs, get the outputs. So if this works out the way I want it to, should be fine. I go run started, run completed, and you can see the preview in the background here of all the geometry, which is a good sign that if this connects the way I want it to, like a stack of cards almost, that's a sign that it's good. You don't have to edit or write to Revit immediately. You can just see the preview. So the preview looks good. Let me go back to Revit. And in Revit, looks like I got my tower. All 68 floors, I believe. Yeah, 69 if you count the roof. So I quickly generated a building, and I could go here and show you the shaded version of it. So I got my curtain wall and floors, and very useful for a study if I just want to see what this thing looks like. If I want to change it a little bit, I can come back here, change the slider to some other numbers. I changed the, maybe I want a boxier building. Let's say 60 feet by 80 feet. I run it again, go back, and I got a bigger building. So you can kind of play around with this. You can have more points. You can change the sliders and get a bigger building and quickly figure out like what this thing is going to look like. And you could do this for a lot of other configurations that require points. So this example, just taking some basic geometry, mixing it with different inputs and outputting floors or walls, or you can probably do this with ducts and conduits when you think about it for multiple levels. For now, we'll leave this as is. We could do more with this, but just be mindful you could change these inputs on the left here. As long as the processing is in good order, you can spit it out. So that's the general idea with the script here to generate the building. Next, let's try something a little different, which should be views. So we have all our levels now, but we also need views. Otherwise, we'd have to generate the views. You could do that through Revit itself. You could just go to the menu, manage views and add views. But I also want to I also want to apply the view template to them. So I want to do a couple of things at once. I typically have to do views and ceiling plans. So regular floor plan views and ceiling plan views. So let's do that, create them all, and also apply a template at the same time. Let's do multiple things at once. In this case, I'm going to set parameter, and that parameter is going to be an output of levels with templates. So already have the levels created. Now we're just going to apply a template. So the templates applied will be the ceiling plan and architectural plan templates. And we're going to use the levels as an input, because levels hosts everything, so we get everything we want out of the levels. And from the levels, all the elements of the levels, I can then generate ceiling plans and floor plans, and from them apply the template, and then you'll see the list. And again, you can use these techniques for other kind of applications. This is a simple way of just generating them. So I'm going to click run, let it go for a moment. And then before you know it, this preview will show me I have all the stuff done. That's a good way of checking. 68. Everything here looks good too. Everything's set. So if I go back to Revit, what do we have? I have all my floor plans like so. And then I have all my ceiling plans. And they do have the templates applied to them. So all at once, I created a list of all the floor plans, ceiling plans, the templates of both. So that's 130 some odd operations I avoided, or 140 actually. So we'll continue that, and we'll do some sheet work. Now we have all our views and levels and they're set up nicely. We'll do the next step here, which is applying the sheets. And the easiest way I've noticed with Revit is to just use Excel spreadsheet. And what you're going to do is create a spreadsheet. Now that we know we have 68 levels, what you want to do is have sheet numbers. You can generate these with Excel, where you have say sheet 8101 associated with level 1, 102 with level 2, and so on until you get to the final sheet. So you have column A with the sheet number, column B with the sheet name, and just have it structured in a very straightforward way, because we're going to use this spreadsheet to tell Dynamo here what to do. So all it's going to do is say, hey, look for the code block, go for the sheet name, which is this guy, the sheet name down here on the tab called sheets from the file path. Look at the index, which is going to be 1 or 0, 1. 0 is A, 1 is B. And then it just says basically put every level onto the associated sheet name and generate it and spit it out. So that's all this is. So again, input is the file that I have for all this content. The processing is telling it where to put all that information. And the title block, I set it to 30 by 42 horizontal. What view type, floor plan, and then just set this all up for me automatically so that all the views will end up on all the sheets. I'll generate all the sheets and I'll add all the views to them. So make sure you have the right path. You have to select it. I already selected here, or a few levels above. So if this works, we're in good shape. So I'm going to run it. And if everything is the way I want it to, it'll give me all the views and all the sheets. I'll do this manually. Since this is a more thorough operation, I'll take a moment. Okay.
And this is amazing. I mean, just, showing the process of from zero to construction documentation. I think that, this is exactly the type of process we should think about when constructing these types of things. In terms of the floors, we do have a question in terms of whether those floors are hosted to the level.
So good question. These floors are definitely hosted by level, which is why I generated all those levels first. If I go to like level whatever, arbitrary 36, click on the floor here, it's level hosted 36 because I generated all the floors in that prior example with the tower I was generating. Every floor made goes to the levels one by one. So if I go here, 3D view, these are all hosted. Everything's hosted. The walls themselves are not segmented. You could do that a different way, but they're hosted level by a base constraint and just pushed up to whatever the height is. But you can split them later. But with the same technique, you can just host them. So every single floor is hosted on a separate level, zero offset, so that these views would work. Otherwise, the views would be really screwed up. You want to make sure everything's procedurally done in a sound fashion. That's why I set that up. So good question.
And the other one is, are you going to be sharing your scripts with the PowerPoint?
Uh, Only if you pay me for a subscription plan. No, I'm just joking.
Which
These will all be
that is a
shared.
question in there that
Yeah.
do you sell your scripts? I basically answered with there are various consulting firms that will work with your company to create scripts based off your standards.
Yeah, there's a lot of companies out there, just as an aside, will help you with that. And this is like a general example we're showing today, right? You can apply this to anything, which is the purpose of this. Otherwise, it'd be too specific. And I've seen lots of great Dynamo examples that are awesome, but they're a little constrained because they might have been made for a specific template for a specific company's way of working. So this is kind of a starting point. But yeah, there's a lot of consultancies out there that help you do very specific things like form work for concrete. I've seen that. So if you guys have any questions about how this would work within the company, feel free to reach out to me uh, uh, online, whatever. You can find me on LinkedIn, what have you. But and if you, any questions you have about that. But for this demonstration, I'll give you the whole package of everything.
But it's also worth noting that these aren't typically something that you're going to be able to just run and have the expectation of exactly what you need. I mean, these scripts will take some manipulation in some way typically to get you the outcome that you would expect or that you would desire. So typically by having either a consultant on staff or the ability to bring them in, or like today, or having somebody specifically hired by your firm like me at Smith Group that specifically helps with computational workflows is obviously advantageous. Either
Yeah, it's a
path.
great point. Dana makes a great point because she's a specialist in this. I worked in specialization of this, and it goes a long way to have like one, two, however many people you need any company working with this technology to just work on it full time, part time, because you get these kind of results. I did this on my spare time when I was making this, and I was doing similar things. They were trying to figure out how to capitalize text in Revit's like room tags. And I'm like, oh, let me, because manually it would have taken you forever. I'm like, oh, let me just do this thing where it's literally a couple of nodes and you're done. And they were astonished. That saved a lot of hours that they could have put to something else. So if you guys are curious about like how would you do this at your company, trust me, if you're using Revit at all or anything that would potentially use low code like this and like a Dynamo, invest in it. Like that's not even to have a debate. Just invest in it and hire somebody or give them hours. And it'll go a long way. And again, you can reach out to me about that, but you will get all the documents here. But yeah, real quick, let's go to the sheets, and then we'll go to our last stage for this demonstration. So I have all the sheets from A101, A168 listed, and there they are. You can use other techniques to center it, but this is just kind of centering to the lower corner of the view to 00 the sheet, and there's ways you can organize it. Revit 2024 has great ways of organizing it. So now I don't have to put each view on each sheet, which is great. I can quickly spit out a set of documents, and because these each have a template, I can quickly modify a template and change the graphics as well. So you're solving a lot of problems very quickly to get this thing set up. Going back to our handy dandy Dynamo, we're going to do one more step here. And we're going to do, now that we did the automation, I'm going to set property values. And what I'm going to do here, so we automated it, annotated it, put it on sheets. I'm going to then modify because I want to put some information. And this is pretty simple. These element.set parameter my name is pretty useful. All it says is like, give me an element. What's your element? Rooms, walls, what's your element? And then tell me what the parameter name is, the property name off to the left that we edit all the time. What property name? Tell me what value you want to put in there. So I'm going to look on floors. Is that floors categories? Yeah, floors. I was going to use something else, but floors is actually pretty good here. It could be rooms, it could be walls. See, you can pick anything in the model. It gives you everything. We'll pick on floors. And if I go back to floors real quick, just to show you what's this going to be, a level, like yeah, 36, whatever. We have comments and mark properties, right? I can manually type this out, but I want to do this for every floor. And I want to make it quick. Yeah, we could select them all in 3D and edit them, but what if I just had a clean way of doing it where I won't make mistakes? Well, we could just go back to Dynamo here and tell it for the property comment and the property mark, for every comment, put reviews SF square footage, and for every mark, just put type 1. And then if I do that for floors and run it, go back here, every single one of my floors will have those comments, and you could just kind of go to town on any element whatsoever in the model, and you can filter them to select certain types if you don't want all of them. And then at that point, you can put kind of any data, number data, text data, this is text data, and say, hey guys, I made my tower, and go from there. And if you don't like this tower, if you think the tower is too boring, there's one more step here. I can just delete this all because we have nothing to lose and go back to Dynamo, and this will be the last thing I'll show you. I kept it simple, but if you want to go to town on this, we have the multi-point version of this where I showed you 4 points. You could do more points. You could do as many points as your heart's content as long as you organize them correctly. So you see everything else is the same with creating a tower. I'm going to just leave these values alone, run, and then we'll get another tower here. Whoops, I picked the wrong thing. I didn't correct the floor. Should be floor, guys, not floor membrane. That's not going to help us very much. So I'm going to correct this real quick. Everything else here looks good. Category, excuse me, levels. Floor is down here. My bad. Levels, L for levels. There we go. Run it one more time. Great. You can see the preview here. It looks like kind of like a half of a casket. And we'll go back here and we have our casket building. I'm gonna run it one more time to clean up the graphics there. There you go. So you can change this to your heart's content. You don't have to be a 4-corner building. Put as many corners as you like. You can use circles. But you can do exactly the thing I did. And I think the views still work here. So yeah, there you go. So that's the presentation today. I would love to show you more, but you know what, guys? I'm not gonna leave you hanging. There's more content here with all the
Well, we'll
examples.
just have to have you back because there are questions all over the place,
I would expect,
which,
yeah, I
which
went a
is
little quick.
awesome.
My
I've been
apologies.
trying to get to them in there.
But
One of them specifically was, could you use a building footprint? Do you want to answer that, or should I really quickly? And just a few seconds for some
oh yeah,
thoughts.
real quick, the QR code here, you see the dinosaur on the right. Scan that, you'll get the entire deck and the files that I used.
Look at that.
But it said building footprint. So if you had the building for, yeah, you could
So
just say that again.
yeah, I would probably say, like, where is that building footprint coming from? Right? Are
Mhm.
you going to use a background from the civil? Are you using like an AutoCAD? And then essentially based off of that, you would just need to select that geometry in Dynamo. So 100% you could use that. One of
Excellent
those things
answer.
that you could bring in a consultant, or like today, or hire someone like myself permanently, not me personally, to have this work within your company. So we'll try to get to all of the questions. Keep them coming. They're awesome. I'm going to throw in the QR code that he just shared with us here so that you can get to all of that. I've also shared the Dynamo primer as well as some Dynamo packages within the area there, alluding to some of your questions. So definitely thank you so much today. That was such a fantastic presentation. And like I said, we'll definitely have to have you back.